So after Frank the Ghost Martin lived up to his nickname by going ghost mode on Shakur Stevenson the moment he had to sign the contract to fight, Shakur Stevenson came out calling Frank Martin a duck, so on and so forth, and everyone has been calling Shakur the Ghostbuster. Now, it was shocking to see Frank Martin do a 180 on the Shakur fight, especially after Frank Martin had already agreed to fight. According to reports, Shakur and Frank Martin had already agreed to fight, but when it came time to sign the contract, that's when all of a sudden Frank Martin went ghost mode. He disappeared like magic. I'm talking about Frank Martin didn't even explain why he turned down the Shakur fight. The only thing we heard was abracadabra and Frank Martin went missing. He went ghost mode. With that being said, before all of this, I'm talking about before the purse bid, while Shakur and Frank Martin was still negotiating, I told you guys that there's a possibility we may see Gervonta versus Frank Martin fight next, because there was a lot of hype starting to build up when it came to the Gervonta versus Frank Martin sparring, similar to Floyd versus Errol Spence. The only difference is Errol Spence was a prospect back then, while Frank Martin is a contender today. In fact, Frank Martin fought for a title eliminator for the WBA and the WBC. So he's in position to fight for two different vacant titles, either against Shakur or against Gervonta for the WBA. Once Devin Haney vacates all of the titles, which that could be real soon, since Devin Haney is fighting Regis at 140. So if Devin Haney chooses to stay at 140, well, guess what? All of the titles at 135 will go vacant. Gervonta could have saw that, and he also could have saw all of the hype Shakur versus Frank Martin fight was getting, while at the same time, the fight between Gervonta and PitBull Cruz wasn't getting a lot of hype. Nobody seemed to be that interested in the rematch. So I thought to myself, if I could see that, I'm pretty sure Gervonta could see the same thing, and he can capitalize on the moment by fighting Frank Martin. Then have PitBull Cruz fight Edwin de los Anjos on the undercard of his fight with Frank Martin. That way, the winner of PitBull Cruz versus Edwin de los Anjos could end up fighting the winner of Gervonta versus Frank Martin on another pay-per-view fight. That made a whole lot of sense to me, which that could be the plan all along. This is probably why Frank Martin pulled out of the Shakur Stevenson fight last minute. Frank Martin could have used the Shakur Stevenson negotiations to leverage the Gervonta fight, or even perhaps leverage more money off Gervonta. I'm just saying. However, Shakur Stevenson doesn't believe that's the case. Shakur came out really upset where he said, quote, "Media is sick. They make up rumors just to protect certain fighters' image. What are y'all even talking about? That man ain't pull out to fight nobody else. Shake my head." End of the quote. Well, if that's the case, then there's no doubt about it. A duck is a duck, and Frank Martin just ruined his image by doing so. However, we do have to give Frank Martin the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, he went ghost mode. Yeah, he haven't said anything else, but he can't say anything else if he is in serious negotiations with Gervonta. He can't spill the beans at the moment in time, but Gervonta did say something recently where he said, quote, "moving in silence." End of the quote. And we already know how Gervonta and PBC do. They always find a great opponent out of the mud for Gervonta to fight on pay-per-view. This well could have been the case where PBC and Gervonta didn't realize how valuable the Frank Martin fight was until they saw all of the buzz Shakur was about to get for fighting Frank Martin, as the fans and media were claiming that was going to be Shakur's toughest fight up to this day. So that ultimately made Frank Martin a valuable asset for Gervonta, because they always accuse Gervonta of fighting nobodies. It don't matter who he fight, they say he not fighting anybody. He's damn if he do, damn if he don't. However, if he fight Frank Martin now, they can't take everything they said about Frank Martin back when it came to the Shakur Stevenson fight. If Frank Martin was going to end up becoming Shakur Stevenson's toughest fight up to this date, then we can say the same thing about Gervonta. Frank Martin will be Gervonta's toughest fight up to this date, which ultimately that's the main selling point to the fight. Even though, some way, somehow, most likely old media gonna flip the narrative. Because we all know if Shakur fights PitBull Cruz, they all gonna say that's gonna be Shakur's toughest fight. However, if Gervonta fights PitBull Cruz in a rematch after a lot of people were claiming the first fight was a robbery, people said PitBull Cruz really beat Gervonta. Gervonta was scared of the rematch. Now all of a sudden, when Gervonta is giving the fans, them exact fans, exactly what they were asking for, now them same people are now claiming they're not interested in seeing the rematch. Gervonta is cherry picking again. We all know what time it is. It's like Gervonta, damn if he do, damn if he don't. That being the case, the Frank Martin fight at the moment in time is the best option for Gervonta on PBC. Therefore, we won't truly know why Frank Martin pulled out of the Shakur Stevenson fight until Gervonta announces his next fight. If Tank announces fighting Frank Martin, then that completely justifies Frank Martin pulling out of the Shakur fight. Because even Shakur himself will do the same thing if he was in Frank Martin's position. If Shakur was presented a Lomachenko fight and a Gervonta fight, you best believe Shakur is going to go after Gervonta. Likewise for Frank Martin. That's why, despite what Shakur says, it's unfair to call Frank Martin a duck at the moment in time before finding out the real reason why he pulled out of the Shakur fight last minute. We got to hear what he has to say, because Frank Martin was reportedly offered $1 million to fight Shakur for the vacant WBC title. Now, even though Shakur won't like to hear this, but the honest truth, Frank Martin did exactly what Shakur Stevenson did when it came to the Devin Haney undisputed fight. Frank Martin turned down his biggest payday for a title shot to fight Shakur. So did Shakur when it came to the undisputed fight with Devin Haney. Shakur team revealed they turned down their biggest payday to fight Devin Haney for undisputed, which approximately was $8 million. The reason why? They want to make more money. Next year or in a few years, Shakur could end up making $20 million instead of $8 million. So Frank Martin could have wanted more money, just like Shakur wanted more money to fight Devin Haney. That's why, to be fair to Frank Martin, we got to hear why Frank Martin turned down the Shakur Stevenson fight. Is it because he have a Gervonta fight on deck? Or is it because he want more money like Shakur wanted more money with Devin Haney? Perhaps Frank Martin doesn't feel like he's ready. Whatever the reason is, let's hear it before making a judgment. Last but not least, a great opponent for Shakur at the moment in time is the Jamaine Ortiz fight. He's highly ranked after the top 5 in the lightweight division under the WBC has officially turned down a fight with Shakur Stevenson. So if we are going down the ladder, Jamaine Ortiz is next. Hopefully Jamaine Ortiz accepts the fight so we can finally see Shakur back in the ring with a good opponent. That's my take on it. With that being said, go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe below. And to be continued on the next episode of Akhi TV. Peace out. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.